Hello, I'm Grayson Brulte, and welcome to another episode of SAE Tomorrow Today. Before this episode begins, please kindly take a moment to subscribe and be notified when a new episode is released. SAE Tomorrow Today is published every Thursday. On today's episode, I sit down with Dave Glazer, Senior Vice President of Product and Merchant Development at Mastercard, to discuss their awesome multi-rail strategy for the future of payment technology, the evolution of QR codes, and how Mastercard is using partnerships to drive innovation and stay ahead of the curve. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Welcome to the podcast, Dave.
Thanks, Grayson.
Dave, to kick off the podcast, will you please kindly share a high-level overview of Mastercard and the innovations that Mastercard is currently working on?
Sure. Mastercard's been a leader in the payment space for the last, 50, 60 years maybe. We're best known for our credit and debit card usage, our open platforms, and our priceless initiatives, I think, from consumers around the world. We do think of ourselves as one of the more innovative players in this space. So we, in addition to card payments, we have what we call a multi-rail strategy. We're very, very much working towards expanding payments around the world, and very much also investing in emerging markets, really helping to bring all the benefits of electronic payments to underbanked and underserved populations.
When I speak to individuals on Wall Street or individuals in the payment industry that think back Mastercard is innovative, and I listened to your recent earnings call, and multi-rail strategy came up several times. Will you please kindly share a high-level overview for our listeners of what Mastercard's multi-rail strategy is?
Sure. Very simply, what we mean by multi-rail is payments beyond traditional credit cards and debit card processing. And so we're investing heavily in many different areas of the payments ecosystem. So things like digital currencies, blockchain, business-to-business payments, QR payment platforms in certain parts of the world. All of those would be other rails in addition to the core things that we're known for best.
So just to put it in simple terms, Mastercard is not just a credit card, debit card processing. It is a full-blown payments ecosystem. Is that a fair statement?
That's right. We provide a full payments management platform.
Okay, this is getting really cool. So you've been in the industry for over 20 years. How have you seen the industry change and evolve?
Yeah, it certainly has changed. I'd say first and foremost, the industry is a technology industry, right? And so with the advent of the internet, and software-based services, and then cloud-based computing, the payments industry has evolved very, very rapidly, and it's extended not just in the sort of the dominant Western markets, but really everywhere in the world. So there's been I think a few really interesting plays that have happened that I've been lucky to be part of. Visa acquired a company called CyberSource back in about 2010, and that was a real shift that caused sort of a new wave in the industry. It was a shift from sort of the large traditional players like Visa taking a look at smaller, more nimbler financial technology players that were moving into the e-commerce space and becoming more and more interesting for merchants and acquiring banks and others in the ecosystem. And then following that particular acquisition, I think a lot of innovators and investors realized the opportunity in the payments and financial technology space. And we've seen a wave of startups over the last 10 plus years move into this space. We've seen many acquisitions and tremendous amount of consolidation and innovation too.
Because you're right about the fintech from the venture capital standpoint. It's a very hot market where capital's flowing in. Is that primarily just in the United States, or are you seeing fintech evolve in other parts of the world?
Yeah, it's happening everywhere. It's happening in all markets everywhere in the world. I'd say just recently there's a lot of news about Ant Financial, which is the financial spinoff from Alibaba in China, preparing for their IPO, right? And they've become such a dominant first payments player, and then banking player, and now financial services player in the China region, but now in Asia Pacific, and they're expanding around the world. So that's one example. Another great example is a firm based in Argentina called Mercado Libre, which they started. They're traditionally a retailer, an online retailer, a merchant. But they've expanded into developing the payments platform as well. Now they're one of the dominant payments platforms in the Latin America space.
And staying on the Asia Pacific and the Ant theme here for a minute, What do you think drove the rapid growth of the QR code payment that we're really seeing dominate over in Africa and in Asia, and not really so much here in the United States? What drove that over there?
Yeah, it's interesting. We did see QR really sort of launch in the Asia marketplace, and now with with the pandemic, we're seeing it show up in other areas of the world, including the U.S. But specifically, the unique proposition that first the Chinese players brought to market, the likes of Alipay and WeChat Pay, was that they developed what we call a super app ecosystem. So they developed a single application available for mobile phones that actually had many sort of sub apps in them. So not only were they offering a retail platform, but they were offering a car service platform and a movie ticket ordering platform and food delivery, all within the same app. So that's why we call it a super app. It's one app containing smaller apps. Well, as that went, there was an opportunity to kind of glue those mini apps together through a payments ecosystem. And so each of those players design their own payment platform, and they use QR as a simple and relatively cost-effective means to exchange the payment information between those mini apps on their super app platform. And that's how QR as a payment platform came to life, and that's how it's blossomed. Now it's interesting, I think it's about 14% of all commerce done around the world is using QR payments, but 90% of that is in China. So still, the QR as a payment platform is still predominantly a Chinese and a Southeast Asia concept, but rapidly starting to extend around the world, as I mentioned.
That's really interesting about the super apps, because here in America, Facebook could have had a super app, but they broke everything up, and you have Messenger and you have Instagram and you have Facebook. Do you kind of see that, since there's a lot of trends historically that have started in the Asian markets and worked their way to America, do you see that super app trend working its way here with payment integrations coming to America at some point in the future?
Well, we haven't seen the super app construct really take hold anywhere else beyond the markets that we talked about. There are some smaller examples of it, but I think the future is that we'll continue. We in the most Western markets, whether it's Western Europe or in the U.S., will continue to kind of see relatively dominant retailers and dominant players kind of have their own ecosystem, less of consolidation. Now, you could argue that Amazon offers more and more through the Amazon store, so that's a retailer that sells lots of things and is moving into lots of other sorts of services. But it doesn't feel like we're going to see that consolidation into the super app ecosystem outside of those spaces. Now, I guess the other thing another aspect to look at the super app providers, they are, as their consumers travel around the world, their consumers love using that super app construct, and they want to, when they do travel to their vacation spots, they want to be able to use their payment method. So we have seen the likes of Alipay and WeChat Pay especially extending partnerships around the world so that Chinese and Asia Pac travelers can use their QR wallets in these other markets. So you'll see, popular travel hotspots like Hollywood or New York City. There will be at large retailers the ability to take those kind of payments.
I used to live in Beverly Hills, and on Rodeo, they would, as soon as the Alipay came on, you would see it in the stickers on the windows, and there was this emphasis, and there was always an individual there that spoke Mandarin that they would say, okay, they can help people with that. So that was really interesting. And I want to stay with you here in Asia for a second, because Mastercard is powering GrabPay for Grab. Could you kind of talk about that partnership? Because I remember Grab in the early days as being the Uber of Southeast Asia, and now they've morphed into a super app, and they have an incredible relationship with Mastercard.
Yeah, and they have, and you're right. And Grab is another great example of a firm that started with a focus, and then they extended into other areas of e-commerce and into this super app ecosystem, and they launched their own payment method called GrabPay. That's the way people pay. Now, we call those systems closed loop systems because the payment system that a firm like Grab will build is only works inside their ecosystem, inside their super app. In order to grow the ecosystem, in other words, to allow GrabPay users to shop at other places, they need to find ways to open up their network. And so that's the kind of partnership that Mastercard seeks to form with companies like GrabPay is where we help them open up their consumers to more merchants and other places to pay by using our very large open global Mastercard network to enable that.
So when you're creating the ability for an individual to pay for a good or a service, and let's take Grab, for example, and you mentioned how these individuals like to travel to Hollywood, or let's use Venice, Italy, for example. Can they use their Grab Pay in Venice or in Hollywood or other parts around the world, or are they limited to where Grab operates?
Yeah, so there's a number of different ways, but one aspect of the GrabPay relationship that Mastercard has is that we've enabled what we call a digital first card with them, so that they can link a traditional Mastercard with their GrabPay account, so that when they do travel, they can use their Mastercard in safe and secure ways everywhere Mastercard is accepted in the world.
Was that relationship with the GrabPay, since that card has no numbers on it, it's a numberless card, was that the first card to go numberless? Because now in America with Apple, and Tim Cook comes out and does a phenomenal job, we have no numbers for your security, but it's like, wait a second, GrabPay had this years ago. Was that the first one to do that?
Actually, I think Apple was the first. Probably Apple was the first one to go what we call use the digital first themes and technology, and then we're bringing that solution to others as well, including GrabPay. That's right.
Are numberless cards the future?
Well, I think it's part of the future. Cards are ubiquitous. People understand that they're easy to use. They're simple. They fit in our wallet. It's super easy to swipe and now to tap. And we could probably talk about tapping some more. But yeah, I mean, as we move into more digital ways to pay, a physical number on a physical card probably actually becomes less important as we can simply exchange bits and bytes more easily.
From a consumer perspective, it seems to me that it would increase security, because I've had my cards compromised and I get a call from the credit card issuer, hey, you've had this charge in XYZ state and I've never been there before. And then with a numberless card, you would just, the bank or the issuer would just change that number and void that transaction instead of having to mail me a new plate.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits for sure. It really simplifies that whole part of the complexity of traditional, banking relationship with the consumer. They don't have to issue the new card. They can just change the number digitally on the back end of their systems.
And if I was using a digital wallet on my phone, same thing. They would just push a new number to the phone then as well?
Yeah, those numbers basically become dynamic and can be changed at any time, and they're secured in the network using what we call our tokenization systems.
This is getting really interesting, because in Q2 2020, 37% of all Mastercard purchase transactions were contactless, up from 28% a year ago. Do you see this contactless trend continuing to accelerate in a post-pandemic world?
We do. Contactless transactions were already accelerating, and with the pandemic, we've seen the need the needs and interests of consumers and merchants to create a touch-free environment has just again accelerated that movement. The contactless technology has probably been around for about 10 years, and it was relatively slow to take off as people learned about the opportunity and the ease of use. Where we've seen it really successful and when it takes off in markets is when we tie it to transportation systems. It's especially subways and bus systems, for example. By creating a super easy, super fast, digital experience where a consumer can simply grab their card, tap a terminal, and continue to moving through their day. And when they see how easy that is and how fast that it is to use, once the consumer's done that 3 times, it becomes a habit for them, and they want to use their contactless everywhere. So transit is usually sort of the tip of the spear for how we introduce contactless. But with the pandemic, we're seeing contactless, especially in the U.S. and Western Europe, really take off much faster than it was.
And I want to stay on the transportation theme here for a minute, because in Tanzania, MasterCard partner with NMB Bank introduced the MasterPass QR, which allows riders of the boda bicycle taxis to pay for their ride. And when I would read all the stuff from the bank and I'd read stuff on blog posts from Tanzania, they talked about how they got hooked on it. Is that similar to what you just mentioned with that example?
It is, and Tanzania is a unique market in that it's much more of an emerging market, right? They don't have the rich traditional broadband in place, but most consumers have mobile phones, and most merchants of all sorts have mobile phones. In this case, we did partner with one of the large banks there to put together a platform that uses QR and allows consumers to order a motorcycle driver to come pick them up, similar to an Uber, but it's all done on motorcycles, and it enables the motorcycle drivers to now be banked and leverage electronic payments for all the safety and security that comes with that, and it enables a much faster interaction and app-based suite of interactions too between the consumers and those motorcycle drivers. So it's been a great partnership, and it is a contactless transaction, but not using credit cards necessarily. It's using the mobile phone and QR technology.
Yeah, I would go as far as saying it's innovative, and you're doing good by the country of Tanzania, and the government came out and said a lot of nice things about your partnership, because you're enabling commerce to flow, but you're also enabling people to get from destination to destination in a secure way where they don't have to worry about carrying amounts of cash, and they can do it in a safe, convenient way. So I give you a lot of credit for that.
Thank you.
And I want to ask you about this, because the QR code was invented by a Japanese engineer named Masaru Hara in 1994 to track components in car factories. Today, as we've discussed, it's used as a global payment platform. What are your thoughts? And if you're going back to 1994 and this incredible growth of QR, was it Asia? Did that spark this whole thing? Wait a second, don't just have to track car components, we can actually conduct commerce on it?
Yeah, I think that's it. A QR code is such a simple thing. It's a two-dimensional picture of black and white ink, but the way the QR code is constructed, it can contain a lot of data, and so it can be used for very simple things. And as a matter of fact, we talked about response and contactless during the pandemic. What a lot of companies have used QR for in the United States, for instance, is the very simple way to pull up a menu at a restaurant, right? Today we walk into a restaurant, we take a picture of that QR code with our smartphone, it launches a browser. So really the only thing that the QR code has in it is a URL or a web link to that merchant or that restaurant's website so that we can order online and pay online. But the QR can also be much more sophisticated, as you've alluded to. And so that's why we think a lot of these, startups, especially with the super app platforms in Asia, when they sought to create their own system, they realized that they could use the QR to store much more information about the security between the consumer's bank account, the merchant's bank account. A lot of other information can be packed into that QR code. So the QR is very dynamic in terms of it being used for very simple, sort of web-based, URL-based systems, but also much more complex systems like a payment transaction.
So give me an example. If I'm going to go buy a book, say, for $19.99, and you're going to go, buy a cup of coffee for $2.99, are those different QR codes, since the $2.99 for your coffee and the $19.99 for my book? Is each individual QR code made for different products?
Well, could be. There's so many ways that a QR code could be used in these situations. So for very small merchants, very small in emerging markets, what we call micro merchant, or a person selling tomatoes on the corner, right? Mm-hmm. So they may only sell tomatoes, but the amount that the consumer buys from them will vary. So they might have a sticker or a piece of paper just pinned to their shirt. And so the consumer can simply take a picture of that QR code. They would then enter in the price for the tomatoes, whether it's $1 or $5, and then they would push the payment to that merchant's account. Now, we can have much more sophisticated QR systems too, such that a QR code could be dynamically generated by a merchant, and it could contain and represent all the different items that were purchased for different price points. And then that could also allow for conducting of the payment from the consumer to the merchant. So there's varying aspects and complexities that can be built into that platform.
Thank you for shedding light on the QR code, because I had no idea how innovative the QR code, or any idea how much you could do. I would just know that the three little boxes on the corner is what kind of enables it. And then you're saying, wait a second, there's a whole, for lack of a better term, there's a whole operating system underneath this that can allow commerce to flow.
Yeah. Yeah, there can literally be dozens of elements of information secretly baked into that QR code.
Now, so we have the QR code, as you said, at the tomato stand. Can that operate on any type of phone? Are there different types of, since we have different types of phones and operating systems, as the payment company, do you have to build for that, for all the different variances that are currently in the market?
Yeah, I mean, there's traditionally two types of phones, right? What we call a feature phone, which is kind of not a smartphone, but the precursor to a smartphone. And in that case, there might be in certain markets, there's an element called a USSD, and that's a code that a person would enter. So a lot of times you'll see a series of numbers underneath a QR code. So if a consumer only has a feature phone, they could type that code into their phone, and then it would create a session where they could interact with the merchant. But then anytime there's a smartphone, in other words, a phone with a camera, and that phone has connectivity to the internet, either over the cellular network or through a Wi-Fi network, then you could have a much richer set of experiences across that kind of wire.
So it's scalable from the emerging market with less bandwidth, possibly, to a more developed market with faster bandwidth. It's highly scalable.
Yeah, completely. And then the next, I'd say the evolution of that technology is what we call NFC technology, right? And so that's the more advanced smartphones that have the NFC chips enabled and built into those phones. So the Android platform, in particular, has opened up their NFC chips. So any phone virtually that runs Android and has an NFC chip now can act as a contactless device. So we can store our credit cards into our phones, similar to Samsung Pay, Google Pay, Apple Pay, and then tap our phones to a contactless reader, or in the future we could talk about a merchant's phone, and actually conduct payments that way too. So over time we'll move beyond the QR as more and more consumers and merchants have these more feature-rich smartphones with NFC chips.
So NFC chips is pretty much the future for this payment technology. So it started with QR, then it's evolving to NFC?
Yeah, a lot of places skip the QR or never went to QR, and NFC and contactless, is already present. So that would be the case, say, like in the UK or in Australia, but certainly in emerging markets, like we've mentioned, China, Southeast Asia, certain parts of Africa, QR has been a starting point for them.
And I'm happy you mentioned the Android NFC, because Mastercard is now allowing processing to happen, so you can tap a phone to pay. Is that a trend that you're going to see that's going to start to expand? So you go back to, I don't know, my daughter likes lemonade stands, and you go to the lemonade stand, I can tap her phone and pay the $1.50 to the phone. Is that going to start evolving now?
It is. About 2 or 3 years ago, we, with our industry partners, developed some new standards that allows for these types of transactions in a safe way. And so we call this merchant tap on phone. And so it allows any person that sells something that already has a smartphone with an NFC chip to use that as their point of sale device. Traditionally, a micro or small merchant would have to go to their bank, or maybe go to a company like Stripe or Square or others to rent or purchase point of sale equipment. And although the prices have come down on that type of equipment, there still is an extra set of fees and an extra set of maintenance that has to be done. We think the tap on phone technology, where the merchant's phone is the point of sale device, will solve for a lot of that complexity, but dramatically reduce costs for these merchants, especially small merchants. And so over the next couple of years, we're going to see a massive wave of innovation as large banks, small banks roll these types of solutions out along with their fintech partners to merchants all around the world. So literally, we expect there to be millions, if not hundreds of millions, of smartphones as point of sale devices over the next several years.
You mentioned that it's going to reduce costs, but to me as a consumer, you're going to reduce friction. So when we come back and we're at a sporting event and you want to buy a hot dog or something, just to be able to tap that so they don't have to go through that whole process. You have to find your wallet and take your wallet out. You'll eliminate friction, and that you're going to create a better experience for me. And that's going to be a lot of fun to watch, because as we continue the society to grow as contactless, it's fantastic. But The technical part of me says, as all this contactless payments come online, do we have the technical infrastructure to be able to ensure that this can scale?
Yeah, so we do. I mean, the great thing today is we're using the existing, wireless networks and Wi-Fi networks to enable this. And now with the advent of 5G coming to life, and new phones that are being brought to market leveraging 5G technology, we'll even see richer experiences being able to. There'll be the simple tap of the phone, but we also expect that there'll be a richer set of experiences between the seller and the buyer. So you can imagine, the seller being able to offer me a discount if I come to my local coffee shop before a certain time at a certain day, right? And maybe that pops up on the day I usually visit the competitor's coffee shop. So because we're going to have more bandwidth and richer interfaces and better built smartphone apps, the ways that merchants from their phones will be able to communicate to consumers on their phones is, it's bewildering to start to even try to imagine what the innovation could be, what are developers and innovators going to come up with now that we've got these foundations in place. It's very exciting.
It's very exciting. It's going to be fun, and there's going to be a common denominator across the board of partnerships. And Mastercard has partnerships with Apple, Google, and Samsung. Could you kind of share at a high level these partnerships, and is this part of a larger overall partnership strategy for Mastercard?
Yeah, I mean, our foundation is to be a global partner to virtually all innovators around the world, right? We've talked about our global platform and how that's recognized as open, secure, and safe and interoperable. And it's important for us also, therefore, to bring the right kind of tools and technologies so that other innovators can build upon our network and our multi-rail strategy. So yes, we absolutely are partnering with the world's leading fintechs, the world's leading global commerce platforms, the way you've mentioned, phone manufacturers, telecom infrastructure companies, all sorts of innovators.
And with innovators, you're always thinking about how do you eliminate friction? How do I build a market? And we're seeing this giant shift globally towards electric vehicles. And today you have to get the app out of your pocket, or you have to put your credit card in to pay for charging. To me, this seems like, okay, there's a really ripe opportunity here to put contactless payments when the car rolls up. It says, okay, Mr. Glazer, we know, boom, and away you go. Are we going to see anything with contactless payments go into electric vehicles in the future to pay for charging?
I think we are, absolutely. I think that'll be key. You can imagine the same technology and the standards that we're putting in place to enable tap on phone. You can imagine just a SIM card that's put in a car with an NFC chip in the car having the same impact, whether you're driving through your fast to pick up fast food, or you're driving in to charge your car or to get gasoline. Any of those use cases are going to be possible to pay or to be paid.
I'm happy you brought up fast food, because on a previous podcast, we had Nicole West from Chipotle talking about Chipotle lanes and how Chipotle's working on this whole contactless experience for food pickup. But you're the glue that's going to hold this together, because MasterCard's going to enable that transaction to come. So this is getting really exciting, and I'd love to ask you this. MasterCard has this really long history of innovation. All your public statements around innovation, your leadership from your CEO to your incoming CEO, are about innovation. Something tells me you've got something big cooking inside of MasterCard that's going to knock the socks off of consumers like me, investors on Wall Street. So what's next for MasterCard?
I think what we're most proud of is the ability to always be looking around those corners ahead of us, right? We don't sit back on our laurels. We've seen plenty of companies that have done that and made those mistakes. We certainly don't want to be in that position, so we're always looking ahead. We do invest tremendously in next generation thinking and innovation. There's a few things that are on our radar that we've been working on for a number of years, and that just laying the groundwork through testing, prototyping, partnerships, and patents. Some of the things that are super interesting for us are blockchain technology and the potential to partner with governments and other technology firms to really think about digital currencies and blockchain and how they can be used in unique ways to help society in the future. Artificial intelligence is tremendously important to make our networks smarter and more efficient and safer. Another area is what we've discussed a little bit already, which are thinking about the next generation point of sale systems, how smartphone technology, contactless technology, and the ability to create offers and notifications and create this much richer interaction between merchants and consumers. These are all areas that we're really excited about and working on strategic partnerships and innovation for the coming years right now.
Well, it's very clear that you're preparing for the future. And as we look to wrap up this conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them about Mastercard and the future of payments?
Yeah, so a couple things. I think our leadership team is really focused on being decent, right? So we're a large, multinational organization. We have an internal saying of we say we do well by doing good, and we're really proud of that. We're focused on a number of partnerships right now to giving back to the planet with our Priceless Planet initiative, where we're working with companies around the world to encourage folks to grow trees and to create a more green economy using the great resources we have. We're continuously investing in small business. We have a goal to bring 1 billion consumers into the electronic payments ecosystem around the world over the next several years. So we're really excited about, of course, bringing technology and payments to the planet, but also being a major constituent on the world stage in terms of doing good for our fellow citizens and the planet as well.
As we've heard on this podcast, Mastercard is not only enabling the future of payments, but they're doing good in society. And Dave, I thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today and share your incredible insights into the payments industry, because I learned a lot today. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, Grayson. Great to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for listening to SAE Tomorrow Today. If you've enjoyed this episode and you would like to hear more, please rate, review, and kindly let us know what topics you'd like for us to explore next. Tune in next week for an innovative conversation with Deloitte. And be sure to follow us on LinkedIn to stay connected and continue the conversation.
SAE International makes no representations as to the accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. The information and opinions are for general information only. SAE International does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast.